What's good, everyone? Welcome back to the Man of Dorks podcast. I'm Mike.
And I'm Nick. Hey, Mike.
Hey.
So one guy said, I'll attack with these two guys. And the other guy said, okay, I'll take 5. And then the other guy said again, that's fine, but when you come back, we need to figure out how much damage that is.
Okay.
Sorry, that one, I butchered that.
It was not the delivery that made that joke terrible, I promise you that.
Well, I went into it thinking that I knew how to deliver it, but...
You did practice enough beforehand.
I didn't know how to start it.
As we're learning, Nick is not meant for stand-up.
I'm not meant for reading jokes.
Sure, we'll give you that.
Okay.
Good joke, Nick. Anyway,
Thanks.
Welcome to the Man of Dorks podcast. Today on our show, we'll talk about our favorite colorless cards in Magic. We'll go through some commanders we think you should be playing, cards that don't see a lot of play, but we think that they should be in the command zone, and then, obviously, common goods. Nick, I want you to start us off today with your favorite colorless card. Go ahead.
My favorite colorless card, or one of my 3 favorites, is Endbringer. Endbringer is 5, and well, it's actually 6, but it puts it as 5 and then a colorless for
So you
some
need
reason.
to cast it with colorless mana.
Right.
Okay.
So it says untap Endbringer during each other player's untap step. Endbringer deals 1 damage to any target, and then you can tap 1 and tap. Target creature can't attack or block this turn, and tap 2 and draw a card. So this card's pretty versatile.
Yeah.
I put this card in a lot of decks. It's pretty sweet. It's got its own little Seedborn Muse, packed into it.
Pseudo-vigilance.
Yeah, pretty sweet. I put this card in my Krufix deck.
Because Krufix builds up so much.
Just because you have so much mana,
Yeah.
you can draw a card every time you pass the turn or deal damage.
Or you've used this a lot to prevent me from attacking or blocking.
Yeah.
It's a control piece as much as it is a card draw.
Right.
Love it.
So yeah, every turn, target creature can't attack or block if you have 1 creature. Every turn I can just say no.
Yeah, and then with 4 people playing, you can do 4 damage around the table.
Right.
If you were like,
It's pretty sweet.
this is sweet. Cool.
What do you got?
I got Psychosis Crawler. Psychosis Crawler is 5-drop for a star. Star is its power and toughness for a horror creature, and it says its power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in your hand. Whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. So its power and toughness is always fluctuating, but you draw a card every turn, so this is pretty sweet to just ping your opponents for 1, each opponent as well, for 1 each turn. But also, I find that a lot of my decks are centered around big card draw. I can't say a lot. I have a lot of decks, but the focus in a couple of them is drawing a ton of cards. So I put this right in there, so I have 10 cards in my hand. It's a 10-10 that I can swing with, and if I can draw 6 cards, 7 cards at a time, you all would take 7 damage at a time. But you got to be careful because you lose the cards in your hand, then Psychosis Crawler is dead. But
Right.
yeah, it's also cool because it's colorless. I mean, all of these cards are colorless, so they'll go into any deck that you play. Yeah. So Psychosis Crawler, I put in a lot of my green-blue decks because heavy focus on card draw there.
Right.
What you got?
So then my next one is Mana Matrix. It costs 6. It's an artifact. It says instant enchantment spells you cast cost up to 2 less to cast. It's kind of weird that it's instants and enchantments. You don't really see that pairing.
You don't.
I have this, of course, in my Tuvasa, the Sunlit deck, because it's all about enchantments.
Of course.
And you got to make them a little cheaper sometimes.
If you could just drop them for free or almost free, then that's a pretty sweet deal.
Definitely.
It's interesting. It'd be best if that was an artifact or an enchantment itself.
Right.
Because then it would just add to the pump effects that you have off of the enchantments. But still, great card for in that deck.
Fantastic.
Totally. Yeah. All right, next I got Leveler. Leveler is a 5-drop for a 10/10 Juggernaut creature. It says when Leveler enters the battlefield, exile all cards from your library. pretty cool for a couple of different reasons. Like I said, I have those card draw decks where my goal sometimes is to draw all the way through the deck and then get a Laboratory Maniac style win where if I have no cards in my library and I would draw, I win the game instead.
If you remember to put it in your deck.
Yeah, in the past I have thought it was in my deck and it wasn't. So, but with this, there's a couple different things you can do with it. If you have a way to give haste and you need to get in a certain amount of damage or have another creature, it's 10 damage swinging at you. You do have to make sure that you can either put cards into your library afterwards so that you don't draw out or that you have that Laboratory Maniac effect. But also it's a 10-10, so if I'm playing red or something like that with a leveler, I'm going to play Fling in that deck so that I can pay 5 to drop it on the battlefield and pay 2 for a Fling, sacrifice this creature, and deal 10 damage to any target. So if that's the last 10 damage that I need to win the game, that would be a sweet play for 7 mana to just ding my opponent.
Definitely. And Juggernaut just sounds so mean.
Yes.
You know? That's awesome.
Yeah. Cool. What you got, Nick?
So my last one is Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger, of course. We talked about this in the last episode.
Yeah.
Because it's so great. It's a 10-10. It costs 10. When you cast the spell, exile 2 target permanents. And like I said in the other video, that's nuts. It's indestructible. That's nuts. And whenever Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger attacks, defending player exiles the top 20 cards of their library. That's nuts.
That's nuts. Yeah, we said all we could say about this last episode, but
you know, you're on a maximum
clock.
Yeah.
Totally.
It's
because by the time you get that out for 10 mana, I've already drawn through 20, 40 cards maybe of my deck, so it's not going to be...
So like 3 or 4 turns.
Yeah, totally.
Out.
It's not like you're swinging in and trying to mill me down from 100 to 0.
Unless you have a Laboratory Maniac.
Yeah.
But we all know how that goes.
I never have it.
You're never going to let that down.
Yeah, I probably won't.
Yeah.
That's okay. It's a good story.
But Ulamog... We said in the last episode that that's my favorite character in Magic, my favorite character in Magic. They're so mean looking.
They are, those tentacles.
They're awesome. All right.
I'll share. My last one is Unwinding Clock. Unwinding Clock is a 4-drop artifact, and it says untap all artifacts you control during each other player's untap step. So a big thing that artifacts do is produce mana. So I put this in my mono blue artifact deck because I also had some other spells like counter spells or some interaction with my opponent. So if I have that mana available to me, then I can do that on everyone's turn. Also, artifact creatures, again, pseudo vigilance. I feel like we talk about this all the time, but I can swing in with my artifact creatures and then untap to have them block. If I have any way to make infinite mana somehow, I can do that on everybody's turn with my artifacts. So Unwinding Clock finds a place in a lot of my artifact decks because it just adds to it. It adds to the synergy because it is an artifact itself. If you were to play this in Urza, the one that your artifacts tap for a blue, then you can create so much blue mana on each of your turns. This would even allow you, with Urza, to have treasure tokens and make your treasures tap for blue mana and then untap during everyone's turn. If you were to put this in a Krufix deck, and you had a ton of mana rocks, you'd just be able to add up that mana. With the new Horizon Stone, you could put that in here with this. It pairs really well with some other mana rocks to just load up on that mana to then cast your colorless spells.
So since this is our last, color, before we get into multicolored, whatever, maybe we should do some honorable mentions.
Okay.
So, Soul Ring.
Of course, absolutely. Yeah. Soul Ring, the top most played card in Commander.
Yeah.
Obviously, Lightning Greaves.
Lightning Greaves and
Swiftfoot Boots, put them in the same category.
Fantastic.
Absolutely. There's one card that's sticking in my mind, but I'm not going to talk about it because it's our common good. So we'll get there.
Okay, we'll get back to it.
But other colorless, Arcane Signet, obviously. Any of the signets are good. The talismans are good. Any of those mana rocks, we love those, especially the cheap ones. I also like Darksteel Forge is amazing.
Oh, the indestructible.
Gives all your artifacts indestructible for 9 mana.
Fantastic.
Any equipment, honestly, equipment are so great. There's a great, actually, I'm going to put this picture up right here. It's Brass Squire. It's 3 drop for a 1/1 or 1/2, something like that. But you can tap it to attach an equipment to another target creature. So I just think that's really cool that its purpose is to be there to cheat around that equip cost. So
Definitely.
artifacts hold a very special place in my heart because I think it was the second deck that I ever built. Commander deck I ever built was Silas Wren artifacts, and
it's had what, 3 commanders since?
Yeah, it's gone through Silas Wren and then Padim, Consul of Innovation, and now it's Joyra, Weatherlight Captain. I could see it moving into Brea at some point. It could become 5-color colorless or 5-color artifacts. It could be mono red artifacts. We'll see where it goes, but I'm really liking being able to.
It's so dynamic.
Absolutely, yeah. I can just keep changing the deck because artifacts are colorless.
Right.
Colorless fits into any deck. And in a format where you have to stick to a color identity, colorless cards just become that much more powerful.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So Mike, why don't we move on to our next segment?
Sure. Our main topic for the day is commanders you should be playing. When I scroll through EDH Rec or I hit the random commander button on EDH Rec and just try to find something new, I find that a lot of the time it just pops up with the popular commanders. Commanders you'll see on gameplay videos and in your local game store, in your own play group, and it's just stuff you've seen before, stuff you know how to do it. It's very linear.
Or ones that are really bad.
Yeah, some really bad ones. Some that like don't even work if they're in the command zone.
They were legends before Commander was a thing.
Yeah, and then some of those vanilla legends from the set legends that are just like an 8-drop for a 4/6 or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's tough to find that. So this is your spot to find cards that you should be playing for your commander. So we'll start off. We're going to do 2 for each color, and we'll start off with white. Nick, you want to read our first white card?
Sure. It is Odric Lunarch Marshal, and it's 3 and a white. And he says, at the beginning of each combat, creatures you control gain first strike until end of turn. If a creature you control has first strike, that happens if the creature has first strike. And then it says the same is true for flying, death touch, double strike, haste, hexproof, indestructible, lifelink, menace, reach, skulk, trample, and vigilance.
So much stuff. That's nuts. So what I love about Odric is also he's a 3/3. Not that his power and toughness really matters until you get those keywords on him, but he is keyword soup commander.
Keyword soup.
Yeah. With this, you're playing white, so you're going to have access to all the equipment and the benefits that go with equipment to attach them for free and search for them. So they give those keywords to your creatures. There's also some great flyers and first strikers, double strike that you get in this color with white. You can make a bunch of tokens and give all of them those keywords.
Yeah.
And it says each combat. So I put this in my white-red soldiers deck, with Tajik, who has indestructible. So at each combat until end of turn, my creatures get indestructible. So that's just so beneficial because that deck is all about combat damage and only being able to swing at your opponent. So even on their turn, they have to make their move during their pre-combat main phase.
Right.
So
it's kind of like slivers in a way.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like
just sharing everything
into sliver deck.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a sick card.
Yeah, pretty cool. I mean, it's had a couple printings. It first came out in Shadows over Innistrad, but I don't know. I still think that it deserves to see more time in the command zone, and you could do some real cool stuff with it.
Right.
Great. I'll read our next card.
Okay.
We have Michiko Konda, Truth Seeker. She's 3 and a white for a 2/2 human advisor. It says, whenever a source an opponent controls deals damage to you, that player sacrifices a permanent.
This is one of those commanders that you love to play because it's so restricting.
Yeah.
But it's in the same way everyone hates to play against it because it's so restricting.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of like
Runetail.
Well, Runetail. I was going to say Grand Arbiter.
Oh yeah. Well, that's white is no stranger to prevention. It's preventing you from doing stuff. I guess the way I would build this deck, I actually built this deck for my girlfriend. I thought the art was beautiful on this card, and mono white seemed like a good way to introduce her into the format and into playing Magic. So, but I wish I didn't. I wish I didn't pick this commander because every time I play against her, I have to decide: do I want to swing in for combat damage and lose a couple of things on my board, or should I just keep digging until I find some sort of removal?
And you always feel bad when you're playing with or when you're forcing your girlfriend to play.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if they don't win, then you know they're never going to play with you again.
Yeah, you got to keep them happy.
Yeah.
But what I would do in this deck, if I had another chance to build it, I just made it previously with all the good white cards that I had.
Yeah.
And it works well. But if I were to do this again, it would just be a lot of removal so that you didn't have a lot of options for things to sacrifice whenever you dealt damage to me. And inevitably, you would have to sacrifice your lands.
Right.
So your board would just continue depleting. And off the top of my head, I don't know if there are any cards that in white that benefit your opponent that they would then use to swing at you to deal the damage that you could give them. I don't know if there are any of those that exist, but I would find some way to make sure that my opponents are attacking me and dealing that damage to me.
Need to gain some life.
Oh yeah, good thing we're in white.
Good thing.
Yeah, neat. All right, Nick, read our next one, please.
All right, so we're moving into blue. We got Tetsuko Umezawa Fugitive, and it's 1 and a blue. Creatures you control with power or toughness 1 or less can't be blocked, and it's a 1/3.
Oh yeah. So at first, it seems like this would be really good for 1v1 because just a bunch of 1/1s, 1/3s, 1/2s, or the other side 2/1s, 3/1s that are going to deal damage. It's going to take a long time to deal 120 damage to all of your opponents to get them out of the game.
Right.
But what I built this deck, and what I did with it is I put in a couple cards that are 1/1s that when they deal combat damage to an opponent, something good happens.
Yeah.
So I'll read a couple of those for you. I have Surikar Spellblade. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may put a charge counter on Surikar Spellblade. When Surikar Spellblade deals combat damage to a player, you may draw X cards, where X is the number of charge counters on it, and it's a 2/1. So this swings in for 2 free damage, and then if you've cast instant or sorceries, which you're going to do if you're playing blue, obviously, then you get to draw that many cards and just fill out your board again. Because what I found going through this deck is all the cards are 1/1s or 1/2s or whatever, so it's tough to have a lot of things to do in your turn after you've dumped all those cards out onto the battlefield, so you need ways to draw, definitely. Right. Let me just read a couple more that I have. I have Coral Fighters. It is 1 and a blue for a 1/1. If Coral Fighters attacks and is not blocked, look at the top card of defending player's library. You may choose to put that card on the bottom of that player's library. So kind of like a Fate Seal type of deal here, scrying for your opponent so that you can kind of control their next draw. If they're flooded on lands and you see a land on top of their deck, leave it there. Leave it there so that that's all that they're going to draw.
Or if they don't have lands, and there's a land.
Put it on the bottom. Exactly. Finally, I put in Raven Guildmaster. It's 1 and 2 blue for a 1/1 wizard mutant. It has morph for 2 and 2 blue, but it also says when it deals combat damage to a player, that player removes the top 10 cards of their library from the game. So kind of similar to Ulamog in That's Nuts, but you'd think normally, like when they printed this card, they were probably like, how often is this going to get through? It's 3 mana to cast for a 1/1. So by that time, your opponent's built a board state you can't get through. But in Commander, with this Commander, with Tetsuko, where it can't be blocked, that puts your opponents on a clock.
Definitely.
Yeah. I will say it's pretty easy to remove these creatures because Nick plays a -1/-1 counters deck, and
bye-bye.
It's very scary against this type of a commander.
Yeah, I like playing against this deck just because it's deceiving, you know what I mean? Like the first, 5 or 6 turns, you're building, you're not doing a whole lot because what are you going to do with a bunch of 1/1s?
Right, until I get my commander out and I feel confident in my board state, I'm not going to do anything.
Right.
Yeah.
And
so I fooled you guys last time. I played with this deck and they were like, he's only got 6 power on the board, whatever. Yeah. And then I wiped everything on their board with a washout, returned all their green permanents to their hand, and was just able to win in the next couple turns.
Ridiculous.
All right, let's go forward. Our last blue card is Blind Seer. Blind Seer is 2 and 2 blue for a 3/3. It says, pay 1 and a blue, target spell or permanent becomes the color of your choice until end of turn. So at first you might think, what does this do? Like,
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, how is this?
I didn't know kind of, what you should do with this condition-wise. I think you explained it to me, I'll let you do it, but I still don't do it first.
Okay, sure. I'll talk about it, and then we'll talk about the issues with it.
Okay.
So, a couple cards that I would definitely put in this deck are Blue Elemental Blast. Pay 1 to destroy a red permanent or counter a red spell. Pay 3 to change, or pay 2 to change the color of that spell to red, and then pay the 1 to counter it. So, free counter on anything.
And it's not a tap ability.
Exactly.
You can do it as many times as you want.
Yeah, there's cards that return all cards of one color to your opponent's hand, so you can change a couple other things that you want to get rid of as well. Will Breaker is a great card in this deck. It's 5 mana for a 2/2, I believe, or a 3/3. Whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes the target of a spell or ability, you gain control of that creature for as long as you control Will Breaker. So you're just turning something into a green creature, and then you're able to gain control of it for 2 mana. That's pretty sweet because it's indefinitely. It's until they're able to get rid of Will Breaker. So those are a couple cards that would fit into this deck. There's a lot of other things like green creatures can't attack you, things like that that you can just manipulate with this deck.
So it's kind of in the same boat as the one we talked about earlier, Machiko, where it's great for, protecting yourself, but where's the win condition? You know what I mean? It would be a tough commander to make because you'd have to figure out some really strong, consistent win condition that you can use with it.
Definitely.
Because, you could hit them 7 times with this.
With my 3/3, yeah.
Yeah.
No, so I'll say in this deck, if you're going to be doing a lot of the things like gaining control of your opponent's creatures and destroying their spells for cheap, or destroying their permanents and then countering spells for cheap, the game's going to go pretty long. Right. So over time, you'll develop enough mana base to be able to cast those Eldrazi Titans or just any big, like Jin Gitaxias type thing that's in blue that can win you the game. I'd run a bunch of those higher converted mana cost big creatures to help me get out of there.
Right. Pretty neat card.
It is cool, yeah. And dive into the EDH Rec page on this and see what some people are playing, because there's some cards that don't seem that great that are actually really powerful in this deck.
Really cool decks, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Moving on.
We have Iname Death Aspect. It's 4 and 2 black. It's a legendary spirit. And when it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for any number of spirit cards and put them into your graveyard. If you do, shuffle your library. It's a 4/4.
Cool.
Pretty sweet.
Very sweet. I feel like these spirits from Kamigawa get overshadowed a lot, but what I would do in this deck, plain and simple, turn 4, 5, 6, play Iname. I would only have spirits in my deck, search for all of them, dump them in my graveyard. Next turn, find a way to return everything from my graveyard to the battlefield. I have a huge board state. Really nothing you can do at that point. That could be a turn 7 or 8 win.
Right. Return all spirits from your graveyard to the battlefield. Is that a thing?
I don't think so. I'd have to look because I'm not very well versed in
Could you imagine?
in this. Yeah, oh my gosh, that would be amazing. And there's some great spirits in mono black. So this deck has a lot of potential, but it pretty much would be a very linear win condition.
Yeah.
It'd be the same thing every time.
Well, if you know me, I like linear win condition.
Nick, you should build this deck. Tell us how it goes.
Maybe I will.
Okay, let's move on to King Makar the Gold Cursed. 2 and 2 black for a 2/3 human, and it has Inspired. So whenever King Makar the Gold Cursed becomes untapped, you may exile target creature. If you do, put a colorless artifact token named Gold onto the battlefield. And a gold says, sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So, what would you do with this deck? I have an idea what I would do with it, but I want to hear from you.
This is a tough one. So when it becomes untapped, you may exile target creature.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of commander where I would be clicking through EDH Rec, and it would come up, and I'd read it, and I'd say, that's too complicated. Goodbye. You ever heard TLDR?
Yeah.
Too long, didn't read? That's this card.
It fills up the whole text box.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know what I would do with this card. I want you to tell me.
Sure, I'll tell you. I would make a vehicles deck with this.
Vehicles.
Because it's a free crew with King Makar, and then he doesn't even have to put himself in danger by attacking, and then next turn he gets to untap. So vehicles are great because Colorless again. That seems to be a theme for the day. They're colorless, so they fit in any deck, especially this mono black deck. And then you'll have the mana to cast them with all your gold tokens. And golds are better than treasures, I think, because you don't have to tap them.
Right.
You know, if someone plays, can't remember off the top of my head, but your artifacts enter tapped. I think it's Blind Obedience, creatures and artifacts enter tapped. You can't use your treasure tokens because you have to tap them to sacrifice and gain that mana. But with a gold token, you just have to sacrifice it.
Right.
So that's pretty cool right there. I don't know why they decided to make that distinction. They're almost the same effect, but
yeah. Well,
I don't know.
If I was to think about it, gold is like, I have a gold coin, I use it, it's gone.
Yeah.
If I have a treasure chest, I got a bunch of gold in there.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
All right, sure.
I can keep using it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, I would do artifacts with this. There's also a couple artifacts that allow you to tap or untap a creature, like puppet strings. So just get a lot of mana and then put in like a Drana or something like this, something you can sink your mana into. Just career vehicles, swing in for damage, draw some cards. Exile creatures, like I feel like we've been glossing over that. We focused on the untap and the gold token, but you get to exile creatures just on this, on your commander. That's pretty sweet ability to have stapled onto your commander. So if you can find a way to tap and untap as soon as he comes in the battlefield, get rid of a threat, then you got your smooth sailing from there.
Cool.
Yeah, let's go forward.
So next, did I read that one or did you read it?
Can't
I'll
remember.
read this one.
Go ahead.
So we have Zurgo Bell Striker. It's 1 red for an Orc Warrior, 2/2, and it says Zurgo Bell Striker can't block creatures with power 2 or greater, and it has dash for 1 in a red, which is, you may cast the spell for its dash cost. If you do, it gains haste, and it's returned from the battlefield to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step.
So what I would do with this is a couple different things. First of all, 1-drop commander. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Get it out on turn 1, it's 2 power. But its dash cost, you can continue to use that every turn. So you can swing in, either your opponent has to block it or take the 2 damage. But I'd also put in some impact tremors and the Perforos that whenever a creature enters, deals 2 damage to each opponent, because he's just going to be swinging, probably dying or getting sent back to the command zone. But every turn, you'll have a creature entering the battlefield, so that's damage to your opponents. There's also some artifacts or some equipment that whenever a creature enters the battlefield, you can attach it to it.
Yep.
And like I said, it's just a cheap way to get your commander into the battlefield and a creature swinging every turn. So use some pump spells on this. You could put in a Zadahedron Grinder and then have your spells that pump up your creatures, target all of your creatures on the battlefield, including your Zurgo. But I just love seeing a 1-drop 2/2.
Yeah.
Especially something that can be your commander and can come out every turn to swing in and deal damage.
Definitely.
That's what I'd do with this.
And you wouldn't even need a Jeweled Lotus to get it out on the first
Just
turn.
a plain old mountain. Yeah, back to basics.
Yeah.
All right, I'll read our next one. Our last one in red is Zozu the Punisher. For 1 and 2 red, a legendary Goblin Warrior that's a 2/2. And it says whenever a land enters the battlefield, Zozu the Punisher deals 2 damage to that land's controller. What are you doing with this deck, Nick?
You're trying to get them to play lands.
Oh, yeah.
And you're trying not to play a lot of lands, you know?
Not too many yourself, yeah.
Include a lot of, we were talking about it before, include a lot of mana rocks, other ways to get mana other than playing lands.
Yeah, there's some good spells in red that add mana to your mana pool. Mana rocks, of course. And how many landfall decks do you come across? So many. They're all over the place now, especially with Zendikar Rising just getting printed. It's unbelievable how many landfall decks there are. So that's going to prevent your opponent, or at least deter them, from searching for a lot.
Yeah, that's one of those plays where they're not going to enjoy the game the whole time. You know what I mean?
Sorry, he is called the Punisher for a reason.
Yeah.
So you knew what you were getting into.
Land destruction would be a good idea.
Yeah, totally. There's a lot of options for that in red.
Apocalypse, is it 4 and 3 red or 3 and 3 red?
Oh, I'm not sure.
I don't remember. It's something like that.
Put it right here.
But it's destroy all permanents.
Yeah.
Everything.
I think it's exile all permanents.
Exile, whatever it is, it gets rid of them.
They're gone. You all have to rebuild, and they're going to have to play lands.
And if they're at, I don't know, 4 life, you play an Apocalypse, and you just sit back and watch.
Just wait for them. They either play lands to play the game or just sit back and
watch.
do nothing.
Yeah, just pass back and forth. But anyway, that card would be tough, but if you do it right,
and that's the point of these, is that they're not a linear, straightforward pattern or plan to build the deck, but you got to figure it out.
Right.
All right, moving on to green.
Yeah, I got the next one.
Go ahead.
This is Grothama All Devouring. It's 3 and 2 green. It's a worm. It says, other creatures have, whenever this creature attacks, you may have it fight Grothama, and when Grothama leaves the battlefield, each player draws cards equal to the amount of damage dealt to Grothama this turn by sources they controlled. It's 10-8.
10-8. 10-8 for 5.
For 5, yeah.
Pretty good.
It's pretty sweet. You play this.
Yeah, I have a Grothama deck because I love green, and this is so different from what you see in green.
Right.
I put in some cards that, whenever they're dealt damage, create creature tokens. So there's one called Saber Ants that, whenever it's dealt damage, you create that many 1/1 insect tokens. So I fight Grothama with it, and then it's dealt 10 damage still.
Right.
So I get 10 1/1s that I can then swing 8 of them next turn at Grothama to kill it and draw 8 cards.
Right.
So my goal in this deck, I have a Psychosis Crawler in this deck, draw a ton of cards, play Grothama as many times as possible, but also I have some things like a card called Withstand Death. It's just a 1-drop green. Target creature gains indestructible till end of turn. So in case my opponents decide to fight Grothama, trying to get that card draw, prevent that from happening, prevent it from leaving the battlefield, and their creatures still die because they fight my big worm.
Right.
I had there was a card altarist that I follow on Instagram, and I had them commission a piece for me of this card, but it's the Alaskan bullworm from SpongeBob, and it's a great shot. She sent me a picture of what it looks like finished. It's in the mail right now. As soon as that comes in, I'll post that on our Instagram. You're gonna want to see it because it looks amazing.
Yeah.
So Grothama. And if you want, you could take this in a totally different route. You could do Grothama equipment. You could just beef this thing up, give it double strike, and swing in for commander damage on turn 6. It's just, there's so much potential with this thing, and it's so different from your other mono green commanders.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Great card.
Very good card. I love playing the deck too. You draw a ton of cards and can do some really crazy stuff with it.
Yeah.
All right, let's go forward. I'll read this one.
Go for it.
This is Thrun the Last Troll. 2 and 2 green for a 4/4 troll shaman. Thrun the Last Troll can't be countered. Thrun can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control, so hexproof. And you pay 1 and a green to regenerate it.
Interesting.
What would you do with this deck?
What would I do with this deck? I wouldn't play it.
Why?
I'm just kidding. I don't know. Well, it's a safety thing. It's safe, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, people you can't get rid of it, you can't counter it. So I guess it might be a good, I don't know. What do you got?
I'd do Voltron with this.
Voltron?
I would slap a ton of auras.
Just because it's, like a safety kind of thing?
Definitely, yeah, because what's the issue with your Tuvasa deck? If I get rid of Tuvasa, what happens?
Bye-bye.
Everything's gone, your whole plan is gone. So if you can't target it, if I can regenerate it easily, you can't counter it, that's pretty sweet right there.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And it starts out as a 4/4. A 4/4 for 4 already that has these abilities tacked onto it, I think has its value there. And it's a troll. It looks so cool.
It is a troll.
Art's gonna be right here, so take a look at it. Look at this art. He's just creeping through the forest. He knows you can't touch him.
Yeah.
So I would definitely slap a lot of artifacts equipment on this.
I thought that you had this this big plan for this card. It was this big intricate strategy,
Nope.
like hundreds of dollars, but nope, just
any equipment you want.
Yeah.
Just cheap stuff. Auras, giant growth on this even. It's just...
Right.
It's got potential to be a solid Voltron commander.
Definitely.
And there's some cards in green that give Exalted, so whenever a creature attacks alone, it gets +1/+1.
Okay.
So you just slap all your stuff onto this, swing in for lethal. It's not going to be hard.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe I've changed my mind because I love Voltron.
Yeah, I know.
Most of my decks are Voltron strategy.
That doesn't really change for this next one.
Oh yeah, so we have Eutropia, the twice favored. It's 1, a green and a blue, and it has Constellation. It says whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. That creature gains flying until end of turn. It's a 2/2.
Mm-hmm.
This seems like a card that I should have in my enchantment deck.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, I would do the same thing with this deck that you do with Tuvasa.
Yeah, just
Auras,
play a bunch of enchantments.
put them right on Eutropia and give it flying, give it that +1/+1 counter that stays on it, and just swing in for lethal. I mean, with flying, flyers are so good in Commander. Like, I feel like flyers kind of get overshadowed, but whenever I see a flyer across the table, it's something I always have to worry about, right?
Yeah.
So to give something flying whenever an enchantment enters, get some enchantments with flash even, so that during your opponent's turn you can give your creature flying. I think you'll have an easy time building this deck.
Yeah. I think if it had card draw, it would be better than Tuvasa.
Yeah, card draw on it, you mean?
Yeah,
you do lose the white. There's no white in the color. So you can't play your replenish. But
I never get to anyway.
But anyway, and then there's like some ways to proliferate. So you put these counters on, and then you can just bump them up in blue and green. Those are good colors to do that in. This would even make a good Pauper commander. It's an uncommon.
Oh yeah.
You know, some great common enchantments, and flying in Pauper is very good.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I love the constellation mechanic.
Oh,
it's so
yeah.
cool.
Because it's an enter the battlefield thing. So if you have a way to maybe flicker them, then you'll get some good benefit.
Definitely.
Cool.
What do we have next?
Next, we have one of my favorite multicolored creatures, Lord of Tressorhorn. It's 1, a blue, black, and a red for a 10/4 zombie. When Lord of Tressorhorn enters the battlefield, you lose 2 life, you sacrifice 2 creatures, and target opponent draws 2 cards. It also has pay a black to regenerate Lord of Tressorhorn.
I'm going to interrupt you there.
Okay.
Because I know you're going to ask me what I'm going to do with this card.
Yeah.
And this looks like a death sentence for me. So obviously,
For you, my opponent, when I'm playing this deck?
for me if I'm playing it.
Why?
Well, because it says I lose 2 life, I sacrifice 2 creatures, and the opponent draws 2 cards. So I guess you could do something like whenever an opponent draws a card, you know, they lose.
I would put like Hull Breacher that just came out to give me the treasures instead, or Notion Thief so that I draw the cards instead.
Yeah.
But I'd make this probably zombie tribal with ways to pump up Lord of Tressorhorn and actually try to swing in for commander damage.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean,
it's a 10/4 on turn 4.
Yeah, three hits and...
So, yeah, as long as you have those creatures to sacrifice when he enters, that's all you need to worry about. You're able to... He's at 10, so you do need to pump him up once to 11 to have a 2-turn clock.
Yep.
Or give it double strike with Fire Shrieker. Great equipment. I feel like equipment and artifacts are really the theme today.
Yeah.
We're really seeing the value in those with all of these commanders. But that's because they go in every deck, you know?
That's true.
And also the regenerate on this. Similar to Thrun that we just talked about, he protects himself. So if you want to do some sort of Voltron strategy with this, then paying just a black to regenerate is really going to help you out. I originally planned on building this deck and making it a deck centered around giving my opponents permanents that I control, because there's like Demonic Pact, which is going to be right here. I don't remember the whole thing off the top of my head, but the last thing, there's a bunch of options on it that you can pick, and you have to pick one each turn, one that hasn't been chosen, and the last one is you lose the game. So you I was going to have my opponents gain control of that before I have to select that, and then they just lose the game that way. There's actually some colorless creatures that say you can't play creature spells, so I would play that, give my opponent the control of that so that they either have to sacrifice it, kill it somehow, just so that they can continue with their game.
Right.
So I love this card. I haven't found a way to make it fully work yet.
Yeah, it's a tough card. Just it seems like it's so limited. There's not a whole lot. that I can see that you can do with it.
Yeah. I'd give it Tainted Strike, which is a 1 and a black for an instant that gives a creature +1/+0 and infect.
Okay.
You're dead right there.
Yeah.
You know, after you decide to take the 10 commander damage, I give you 11 infect instead.
But you could do that with any 10 power commander. I guess
there's not too many of those though. And if you can get this out on turn 4 and swing it for turn 5.
Yeah. The mana cost is pretty great.
Yeah, you just have to make sure that you are able to sacrifice those 2 creatures, because if you don't have 2 creatures, then Lord of Tressorhorn has to be one of those creatures that gets sacrificed. But yeah, I mean, this is the same colors as Nekusar, where whenever an opponent draws, or I can't remember if it's player or opponent, but they lose life whenever they draw cards.
Oh, yeah.
So that would just punish them a little bit more if you wanted to play this in your Nekusar deck or the other way around. You know, so just little ways that you can get around that, and like you said, the mana cost really makes it worth it.
Right.
Yeah. All right, I got one more.
Oh, okay.
One more for us. I feel like we should focus on a colorless commander because we did all the other colors. I just have one because all the other ones are like Eldrazi Titans, and people are playing those. So what I've selected is Hope of Girapure. It's a 1-drop, so colorless 1 for a 1/1 Thopter with flying, and it says sacrifice Hope of Girapure. Until your next turn, target player who is dealt combat damage by Hope of Girapure this turn can't cast non-creature spells. So a lot of text on there, but 1/1 for flying, 1/1 with flying on turn 1.
Yeah.
I feel like, again, I'm leaning towards a Voltron strategy with this. It's already got that keyword on it. It's in colorless, so I'll pop all those equipment on it. But that it has some form of protection for itself, where you can sacrifice it to prevent your opponents from casting those non-creature spells. You just have to make sure it's dealt the combat damage to them first.
Right.
But I feel like this one totally gets overshadowed, because if you want to play a 1-drop commander, you're going to reach for Riz or Zergo Bellstriker like we mentioned before. But this one's got a lot of potential to it, especially because it has some control as well.
Definitely some restrictions.
Oh yeah,
Kind of annoying.
Yeah, I've tried to build a colorless deck, and
I remember that.
it's hard. Well, I tried to build colorless Pauper, and that was never going to happen. I used Apocryphite as my commander, and I wanted to do a Voltron strategy, but I just couldn't compete. I couldn't compete with that deck. So now that you have access to all of the cards with Hope of Girapure, then slap some equipment on it, make it bigger, get all your mana rocks out there, play those Eldrazi Titans in the deck, but give this little 1/1 Thopter a chance to lead the charge. Yeah?
Definitely.
Great. All right, Nick, I think it is time to move on to
Common Goods.
Common Goods. We need a jingle for that. We totally need a jingle for Common
Anyone
Goods.
want to write us one? Dan Glover.
So we'll figure that out later.
Yeah.
But Nick, you want to read our Common Good for the day?
Sure. We have Scour from Existence. It's a 7-drop colorless instant, and it says exile target permanent. That's it.
That's it.
That's all you need.
Nick, tell me one good thing about this card.
It can exile anything. Most cards would say, exile target
Non-creature permanent.
Anything like that. But
non-land permanent. So
you can exile anything.
Nick, what's one bad thing about this card?
It costs 7.
It costs 7 mana. I mean, you got to remember, it's colorless, so it fits in any deck. It's also a common. So you can't expect it to be like 4 mana or something like that. But this is a great deck for, I would say, mono red decks, or a great card for mono red decks, because you need help getting rid of enchantments and creatures sometimes.
Right.
I'm also going to say exile is really important to be on this card.
Yeah,
if it said destroy, it would not be worth playing, but exile is very good to get around indestructible.
Yeah.
And any sort of death trigger or enter the graveyard trigger that your opponent might have.
Definitely.
So Scour from Existence, put it in a Pauper deck. Put it in all your Pauper decks, because you'll find something that you'll need to get rid of at some point.
Definitely. And the name is really cool. Scour from Existence.
Yeah, and the art looks sick too. In the background there's a sick Eldrazi just...
Looks like Ulamog.
Yeah, it could be. Could be.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, check out those commanders that we just talked about. The pictures will be up here, so if you need to write them down while you're watching this video, you can. Send us your thoughts on the decks you're building. If we missed anything while we were talking about any of these commanders that you play, let us know, because I need some new ideas for these. I told you all my ideas for these decks, and some of them are lacking a little bit, but I do want to build some of these. So reach out, let us know what we can do with these decks, because there's a lot of potential in these.
Definitely.
Oh yeah.
You guys want to reach out to us, themanadorksmtg.com. You can send us messages. You can see what all the platforms we're on. If we're not on the platforms you need us to be on, tell us and we'll be there.
Yeah, it's important to like, subscribe, tell your friends about us. Word of mouth is super important, especially in the Magic community. Stay safe out there. Play Magic. Keep playing Magic.
Yeah.
It's getting me through all of this stuff and keeps my brain occupied. So,
definitely.
Well, we'll catch you next time on the Mana Dorks. We'll see you then.
See ya.